you ready to start being visible? My name is Mildred Talabi. I have spent the past decade plus mastering the art of personal branding in my career as a former journalist, PR and communications professional, and in my business, which has taken on various forms over the years. I now spend my time championing and coaching women to increase their influence, their income, and their impact through being visible on platforms like LinkedIn and beyond.
I would not have met all these wonderful women had I kept hiding, had I not decided to be visible. Being visible has also made me, what's the word, stand in my voice.
In the Start Being Visible podcast, I am going to be sharing with you my insights into the journey of being visible, as well as bringing you amazing, candid conversations from women in the professional world and the business world who have decided to step out of the shadows and into the limelight in their own work lives.
I think when I first started this, being visible was quite a scary thing for me because I get a bit scared about the criticism. We've had a conversation about this on, you might not remember, but when I first started following you, I remember messaging you saying, I'm really scared about the old white men on LinkedIn telling me to get off LinkedIn. And I still have that underlying fear, but it's getting less and less the more I do.
You are absolutely going to love this podcast. We are going to explore the highs, the lows, and the in-betweens of being visible so that you can be equipped with the courage, the knowledge, and the resources to start being visible in your own life.
Visibility is just showing up as my unique, authentic self and using my voice, to share who I am and what I do, and to speak directly to my ideal clients and my clients.
I cannot wait to bring this to you. So I want you to hit the subscribe button wherever it is you listen to your podcast so that you never miss an episode. And I look forward to seeing you on Start Being Visible. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Start Being Visible, which is a client spotlight episode. Now, the client spotlight is where I get to introduce you to one of my fabulous LinkedIn visibility coaching clients so you can learn from their journey and experience to being visible on LinkedIn and beyond. So my guest today is the very fabulous Andrea Pooler. Now, Andrea has an extensive background in the jewelry industry. Prior to managing several departments for one of the largest retail jewelry companies in the world, Hill & Co., she designed and crafted her own fine jewelry line and ran a sole proprietorship. At Hill & Co., Andrea has advised some of the largest manufacturers, retailers, and designers on growing their businesses, leveraging her expertise to understand their needs and their goals. Now, Andrea develops overarching strategies and manages their accomplishment in every area of clients' businesses. Andrea has profiled and interviewed many key industry individuals for their YouTube channel, as well as presented talks at industry trade shows, and has been interviewed and published herself on multiple jewelry industry platforms. She is committed to giving back to her community and to the jewelry industry, and is the vice president of the mentorship committee for the Women's Jewelry Association and Volunteers of Pure Earth, and is the resident volunteer jewelry appraiser for a hospice store. Andrea, you are one busy lady.
I am very busy. Thank you for having me, Mildred.
Oh, that is so good. So just to, I love that bio. There's so much that you've done. And, from there, it's very obvious that jewelry is your passion and something that you've started from the beginning. So where did that interest come from for you, that whole jewelry interest?
Well, I've been making jewelry since I was 12 years old. So my mom bought me a jewelry making kit one Christmas, and I started to make the jewelry. And she told me, do you want to put it out into her art gallery to see if anything sold? So instinctively, I just knew, I need a brand name. I need to make some little cards. I need to sign it as if it were a piece of artwork. And so I created all of that. I put some of my pieces out into the gallery, and they just started selling. And here at 12 years old, I kind of gathered this following of customers coming into the store and looking for what was the next new thing that I had been making. So I was started making, a couple $100 a month as a 12-year-old running my own business. Not bad. So
Wow.
that was kind of the beginning that got me, kind of hooked me for life. And then, of course, I continued through high school and college, designing and making jewelry, and then started my own business, like you just said. And I did that for 15 years, from the age of 22, and traveled all over the United States doing shows, wholesale shows, retail shows, trunk shows. Over 500 shows in the 15 years that I had my own business. And then at the end of my career of running my own company, I also had a store in Brooklyn. So I did that for 4 years, and then ended up moving on to working in the corporate jewelry world for a really large retailer, and kind of grew with them, where our business grew over 400% in the first 3 years, and then continued to grow exponentially. And so I managed multiple departments and did that for quite a few years, over 7 years, and then landed at Hill & Co. A couple years ago. So now what I do is I take a little bit of all of my expertise in all the areas of my career over the last 25 years and put them to work, helping build business strategies, and then implementing it and doing the work along with our clients. And so that could be in any part of any jewelry, gemstone, or diamond industry business. And we do everything from branding to marketing to digital transformation, operations and HR review, financial review, and the list goes on and on and on. So everything that you can think of that you might need for any business in jewelry, gemstone, and diamonds. And how we're unique and different as consultants is everybody on the team has only ever worked in jewelry, gemstone, and diamonds. So we understand the intricacies of that industry.
Wow, that is absolutely fascinating. So it seemed like your business was doing quite well. So what made you pack it all in, so to speak, and go into, corporate jewelry and working for somebody else?
So I actually had a young daughter at the time. She was just a baby, and I could not do the traveling lifestyle anymore. And so that's kind of what forced me into thinking, well, I want to stay in the jewelry industry. I just knew I needed to move into a different aspect of it. So I was looking something that was more corporate, Monday through Friday, having my weekends free. And although, I had loved what I had done in the jewelry industry, running my own company, I just realized at that point in my career, it was more my personal life that was pulling me in another direction.
Okay, I totally understand the sacrifices we make for our children, All right, so I love it. So you go in and you're now with Hill & Co. And at the time you reached out to me, which was I don't know, maybe about a year or so ago. So where were you in terms of your work life, and what role did you think being visible, particularly being visible on LinkedIn, needed to play for you at that point?
So at the point that I had already been, posting on LinkedIn, and communicating with people and connecting with people, doing all the things that that you should be doing if you're on LinkedIn. But I was still kind of struggling with it at that point of I think a lot of it was more about being confident with putting yourself out there. I think that's a huge thing. And so that's what I was really struggling with, and also just coming up with a scheduled time to actually create the post and do the post and figure out what it was that I wanted to talk about.
Okay, so and I wanna get into why you reached out, but firstly, what is your definition of being visible? Because that's the word that I use, and this show is called Start Being Visible, because I'm all about encouraging women to, as I say, step out of the shadows and into the limelight. How do you describe visibility?
So to me, I think at this point in my career, and within LinkedIn, I'll say, it's interesting. I go to events and I speak to people, and the first thing they say is, "Oh, I just love seeing what you're posting on LinkedIn, and I can't wait to see what the next story is. And so I think that to me is what has made me realize how important it is to really be visible. And I think that's what being visible is when people start noticing and seeing the content that you're producing and putting out there.
So at the time that we connected, did you feel that you were visible at that point?
I just knew that, I was just looking for little tips here and there as to how to push it further. And what could I do to improve myself? So I'm always into taking classes of any kind of sort. And also, just trying to figure out, what's the new thing that might be able to help me, in my personal life, in my career life, on LinkedIn, whatever that is. I'm always willing to learn something new. And so that's kind of the aspect where I was at that point.
Okay. So you were at a place that's like, okay, you were doing stuff on LinkedIn, engaging, connecting, I guess kind of like DIYing it without a specific strategy as such. And as somebody into personal development, you thought, okay, let me get some help with this so I can do it even better. Would that be correct?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there were definitely a lot of tips and things that I hadn't thought of that you had brought up. I also read your book, and I thought the book was very telling and very helpful. So I think that really helped me. And just kind of reevaluating it from another perspective. I think it's always good in anything. It's almost like an audit. Take an audit of your profile page and see where you need improvement, and having somebody else's perspective on it, I think really helped.
So you're in a kind of, it's not a unique position, but sometimes people think, oh, you're an employee, you work for a company, you work for an organization, but how do you navigate the balance between being visible under your own brand and being visible under your company brand? Do you find that to be a conflict? How have you managed to navigate that in your journey to being visible on LinkedIn?
So I think, I'm out there representing the company. So my brand is the company brand, and it's also about me. So it's really about my brand and what I do at Hill & Co. What I share personally, I think, you're on LinkedIn. This isn't Instagram or Facebook. And to me, it needs to be a little bit more professional. And although I do share completely personal items and sometimes some really, really personal items, I think the majority of the content is business related. And then I will always talk about some personal aspects of my life. But of course, the personal stuff, I think that depends on the person, what you feel most comfortable sharing and what you don't want to share. So, I do have friends who won't share anything personal on LinkedIn. And then I have other people who only share personal stuff on LinkedIn. But for me, I think it's a professional platform. And so that's really where I'm talking about what I do at Hill & Co., my processes with my clients, different projects potentially I'm working on, different events, industry events that I'm going to, or if I'm doing a talk somewhere that I'm talking about that beforehand while I'm doing it and afterhand on LinkedIn. But then I do like to add in the personal because, I'm very authentic, and I like to put myself out there and for people to understand who I am as a professional, but also in the personal world too.
Can you give us some examples of the kind of personal content that you've shared on LinkedIn?
Sure. So I think, I talk about my daughter a lot, and I'm sure you've seen some of the posts that I talk about my daughter. So, I'll do some posts on her. Sometimes I'll just do a post on, it's my morning coffee. And so I'll have a picture of my coffee with my breakfast. Sometimes I've done some posts on Halloween, and I even linked it back to, she had organized her Halloween candy by product type. And so I linked that back to, making sure that, organizing or auditing your inventory as a jeweler, right? As a jewelry company. And so those kind of similarities there. So there's also opportunity, I think, to take a personal post and wrap it into business somehow. Not all the times, but sometimes. Or sometimes it's, it's just what I've cooked for dinner. So, and I like to do a lot of posts when I travel as well. So the travel posts are really fun and unique too, in conjunction with, of course, the business posts that I put out.
Of course. And in terms of your organization and how they receive your posts, what has been the reaction? I mean, what have they said about the kind of posts that you do on LinkedIn?
I mean, I think that it's about me as a person and my personal brand and the stories that I want to get across, or the ideas that I want to get across. So they're very supportive.
Okay, because if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, well, I'd love to do more of posting on LinkedIn, but my employer might not be quite as supportive, as Andrea's. Like, what advice would you give them in that capacity?
So I would say there's always a way to do a personal post where maybe it doesn't feel so personal. Like, it could be a view of your desk. Like I said, it could be your morning breakfast sitting at your desk. It could be anything related to something like that. I think is a good place to start, right? Maybe it's just a view out of your window where you're sitting at your desk potentially, right? So I think all of those are good places to start, because it is still considered a personal post, but you're pulling in the background or the theme behind it is something work related.
Okay, so the key is making it relevant.
Yes, making it relevant.
Okay, so there are like I've found, so in the space of doing this over the last few years or so, I find that there are quite a few obstacles that keep a lot of women from being visible on LinkedIn, and they're all based around fear, so there's the fear of judgment, there's the fear of appearing boastful, the fear of being appearing too salesy, even all of that. There's all kinds of things. What would you say was the biggest thing you were afraid of, if anything at all, before you really started your journey to being visible on LinkedIn?
I would say the thing that I was most afraid of or most scared of was just putting myself out there. Like, once you get over that hurdle, it's very easy. And just to know that, the people that are interested in your type of post will read your post. If they're not interested, they're just going to move on.
Of course. And what was so scary about putting yourself out there? What element of that was scary to you?
Like, am I putting out the right content? Am I framing this the right way? Is it the right type of post? So all of those things, I think, kind of come into play. I think at a certain point, you just have to do it and then see what works for you, and then continue doing more of what is working for you.
And what is working for you right now on LinkedIn?
So for me right now on LinkedIn, I think just the combination of the personal and professional posts. And I've started to do some videos. So I'm starting to do that, although I'm not as comfortable with the videos yet. I always prefer a picture, but I'm starting to get into that. So I would say that's where, I'm just dipping my toes into it until I'm really comfortable with it.
And talk to us about your showing up schedule. Like, so how often do you currently post on LinkedIn? How do you engage with people? What's your LinkedIn habits that you're doing at the moment?
So I would say I'm posting 2 to 3 times a week. So it's not an over amount of posting schedule to feel like it's bogging yourself down. So, but then showing up every day, commenting on other people's posts, connecting with people. I think that is, just as important as making the post, maybe even more important.
Absolutely. It's like you can't just do one on its own, posting, and as I call it, post and ghost, you can't do that.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. So what would you say has been the biggest or some of the biggest surprises that you've experienced on this journey to be invisible?
Some of the biggest surprises. I guess sometimes it's surprising to see how many people are reacting to my posts. So sometimes I find that like, I'm like, wow, this one really, took off. And sometimes you can't really try not to over analyze why some posts don't take off or you don't have as many comments, because it could be the time of day. It could be the day of the week. There's so many other factors that go into it. So I try not to analyze post by post. You just put the content out there and watch the KPIs and see if you're improving.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say like it's so important to detach your ego from your posts, because you really cannot predict sometimes what post is going to do well and what's not. And then if you're like, right, and it's always the one where you're like, this one's going to do so well. You put it out there and it's like crickets, So
Yep.
yeah, definitely. So you've got to just put the post out there and keep it moving, So
Yep.
yeah. Okay, so what are some of the personal benefits that you've experienced from being visible? Because on a professional capacity, and I'll ask you about that in a minute, but on a personal level, what has it done for you to be putting yourself out there on LinkedIn like you have been over the last few years?
I would say, I think, people in general, then they get to know me in a way that they wouldn't necessarily get to know me. And if I see them in person, they have some tidbits of a little bit or a little glimpse of what my life is like. So I would say that I think is a huge benefit. So I think that's the most important part.
Yeah, it's like they feel like they know you, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what about on a professional level? What has been some of the benefits there for you?
I mean, definitely the same answer for sure. But it's just, you get to see a little bit of my brain and how my brain works in business with what I currently am doing with my job at Hill & Company. So I think that's kind of the most important thing to see, different things that I might talk about with business strategy or different projects with a client, although all of that is confidential, but, I can talk in generalities when I'm traveling to go to a trade show or to do a talk. All of those things I think are really important things to be putting out there.
Absolutely. So it sounds like having a variety of content that you put out on LinkedIn has been an asset to you as well. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. I mean, I think that's definitely something that, that's like a LinkedIn 101, right? You can't just be putting out only one type of content. It has to be varied.
I love that. Yeah, definitely. So different things resonate with different people. Okay, so if you look back on where you were at the beginning of this journey to being visible and where you are now, what has been what would you say is the one biggest thing that's your biggest takeaway from this whole process, like that you may not have thought of at the beginning? So what's the thing that you now know that you didn't know at the beginning?
I mean, I guess at this point, like you were talking about right now, the most recent, the last couple of months, I would say it's that people really think that they know me, and I'll go to an event and people who already know me say, oh, I can't wait to see what's the next content or the next story or what are you going to talk about next. And then people who don't know me will come up to me and say, I know you. And I'm looking at them like, I don't know them. They know me, but they know me from LinkedIn. So they think they know me, but we've never met in person.
Yeah, and that's the power of a personal brand, right? Even though you're doing this for your company as well, it's like you've been, because I read your posts and I'm like, Andrea, that's some amazing posts, and which is why I wanted to have you on the show for us to have this conversation. It's that whole thing of when you build a personal brand, people get to know you, like you, and trust you. And it's kind of like the celebrity affair, which is why we all love our favorite celebrities. We watch like a few of their films or listen to their music and we feel like we know them. It's the same kind of thing that happens when you build a personal brand on LinkedIn. You build a connection with your audience that is actually really remarkable for the purpose of building your business or putting your career forward and all of that. So yeah, I think that's really powerful thing that happens on LinkedIn. So I guess the final thing before I let you go is, what is your number one piece of advice to share with somebody who is reluctant about being visible on LinkedIn?
So I would say, I think I don't know if there's one piece of advice, but I would say the one thing that I think is the most important is like, just come up with a post and post it. And don't get so bogged down in what that content is that you're posting. If you're just starting out, just create something and do it. And then you'll see if it's working for you. But just by sitting there and not doing it and say, okay, I'll do it tomorrow, and to be frozen and to not post at all is definitely something I would not do, right? I would not recommend that. So I would say, what I always say to people is, every day of my life is like jumping out of an airplane. So you just got to jump out of that airplane and take that chance. So it's all about taking chances, and then you can tweak it along the way, but just don't overanalyze posting in any aspect of whatever that means to you when you're starting out.
I love it. I love it. And you have literally jumped out of an airplane, Andrea.
Yes, I have. And I enjoy it.
Never me, but hey, good for you.
And I put it on LinkedIn. So there you go.
That's how I know about it, you see. I know all about you, Andrea.
Yes.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So how can we find out more about what you're doing and what you're up to at Hill & Co?
Well, you need to look at my posts on LinkedIn. That would be my first thing I would say. But yes, no, you can go to my profile page. You can look me up there. You can send me a message. And also the company's website is on my profile as well.
Okay, brilliant. That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, Andrea. And, I love the journey. I love the evolution and what is possible for anybody who is watching this right now and you're thinking, I want to start being visible. This is the push that I needed. Please feel free to reach out, get in touch with me. Go to startbeingvisible.com to find out more /coaching if you want to talk about coaching. And of course, if you want to connect with Andrea and see her wonderful posts on LinkedIn, go and search her up, Andrea Pooler on LinkedIn. You will have all the links in the show notes. But that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you, Mildred.
Okay, hold on a minute. Before we sign off this episode, I know I don't normally do this, but I feel like it's very important that we don't miss the point of this conversation with Andrea. Now, the reason I wanted to have Andrea on this client spotlight is because Andrea is a great example of what I call an employee influencer. Now, if you don't know what this means, I want you to stay tuned, because in the next episode, I am going to go into what it means to be an employee influencer, how building your personal brand can actually help your corporate brand. And then for the managers, the HR people, the organizations that are listening, the organization leads, I'm going to share with you how you can encourage more of your employees to become employee influencers. Because here's the thing, LinkedIn is not just for business people. LinkedIn is not just for you if you have something personal to promote or for yourself. If you are an employee, you absolutely can build your personal brand on LinkedIn, and you can do it in a way where it actually elevates your company brand as well. And I'm going to show you how to do that in the next episode of Start Being Visible. So don't miss out. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on this episode, and make sure that you tune in same time next week for Start Being Visible solo episode, where I'm going to go into how to become an employee influencer. All right, that's it for this show. Remember, if you've enjoyed this episode, please rate, please review, please subscribe and download, and I will see you on the next one. And I look forward to seeing you on Start Being Visible.